I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. I'm walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. I'm walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. I'm walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. There ain't nothing wrong with keeping my mind stayed on freedom. Oh, there ain't no harm in keeping my mind, hey, stayed on freedom. There ain't no harm in keeping your mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. I'm singing and praying with my mind stayed on freedom. Yeah, I'm singing and praying with my mind, yeah, stayed on freedom. I'm singing and praying with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, 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 yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, good morning, Judson. My name is Reverend Dr. Valerie H. Holly. I am an associate minister here. I'm actually one of 3 ministers here. We have also Reverend Micah Busey and also Reverend Dr. Donna Scopper. All 3 of us welcome you here today to Judson Memorial Church. We're so excited that you decided to worship with us today. Now, one of the things we like to say is that this month we have been very excited about the fact that we are celebrating Black History Month. And what's so exciting about it for me is that none of our speakers are really guests. And I don't want to call them guests because each speaker has been connected or a member of Judson. Judson knows them and we know the speakers. And this Sunday, our speaker is none other than the Reverend Michael Crumpler. But before I go on further with that, I want to remind everyone that if you are wanting to find the bulletin, which will allow you to follow along with the service, as well as find our songs, and just be able to know where we are in the service, you may be able to find the bulletin or access the bulletin right below where you access this Service. If you go to www.judson.org/worship, you'll be able to find the bulletin, and you will be able to click on it there and see the bulletin and follow along with us. So I'm hoping you're able to do that if and when you want to. And so one of the things that we do here at Judson, to begin our service, we have what we call a land acknowledgement. And I'd like you to join me now as I recite the land acknowledgement. And if you have the bulletin, please join in with me, okay? Our physical space stands on the unceded land of the Lenape people. Judson Memorial Church acknowledges the Lenape community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. And we make this acknowledgement as part of our work to dismantle the ongoing legacies of Christian supremacy, settler colonialism, and white supremacy. And now, after we have recited our land acknowledgement, we are now going to do our call to worship. And Reverend Crumpler has decided to utilize an excerpt from the National Youth Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman inaugural poem, The Hill We Climb. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. And the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. And yet the dawn is ours. Before we knew it, somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. And here is your opportunity to join us all in a song. Our first song is going to be Lift Every Voice and Sing, and the words are in the bulletin so that you can follow along. Lift every voice and sing.
Good morning, Judson. What an honor to have been invited by the Reverends Micah Busey and Valerie Holly to lead what is the third in a series of Black History Month services. I also want to thank Reverend Faith Holman and again, Reverend Valerie Holly for setting the bar so high. So if I overshoot today's sermon, you have them to blame. And of course, we're looking forward to the fabulous Michelle Thompson to lead us next week. But on this third Sunday of what I am calling Black Advent, yes, Black Advent, because it is the coming of the Black Church to Judson, we're going to do something different. But you'll be fine because, you know, it's Judson after all, and that's why many of us have been here for so long. Rather than the traditional order of service, we'll have three movements as we consider Black to the future, asking ourselves what will be tomorrow's Black history at Judson and beyond. The three movements are simply the Black past, the Black present, and the Black future. In the Black past, we will engage Judson's Black history as you will witness me get schooled by Mary Meyer, Maxine Phillips, and Abigail Hastings, who let me know what it was like when they came to Judson in the 60s and 70s. Yes, I interviewed Mary, Maxine, and Abigail, who shared with me all sorts of things that I had never heard before. The Black present, we will engage what it feels like to be Black today, because today is tomorrow's Black history. And by today, I mean like in this current political moment that we're in, with all that's going on, with all that went on Capitol Hill, all that's still going on in the courts and in politics. Like, I think that we tend to forget what Black people are feeling. So I want to connect us to the feeling, that like Black rage that many of us carry in the midst of white supremacy culture, or even like white liberal spaces, as we work alongside and live alongside people who don't share our experiences, and in some sense will never really know what it feels like to be Black. And finally, in the Black future, we will engage Black futurism. We're not going to go all like Black Panther per se, but we want to think about what it's going to be like when folks in the future, Black folk, look back on our current reality, look back at what will then be their Black history. How will they, what would they think about how we in this moment responded to the events of today? The Black church, abolitionists, civil rights leaders, they weren't archivists just, you know, concerned about, you know, preserving, you know, their experience. They were actually futurists. They were prophets. They were dreaming into the next generation, you know, a reason for their own survival. So as we consider today, you know, we don't want to get it right just for the sake of getting it right and for the history books. We want to get it right so that there will be a future. So I hope you enjoyed today's services. Please hang around afterward during coffee hour so we can have a conversation around the elements that were shared. Thank you.
I would like to add someone to our group here. Professor Paul Weiss, a Sterling Professor of Philosophy at Yale. Were you able to listen to the show backstage?
I heard a good deal of it, but then I was behind the rostrum here.
Yes.
So I heard only some of it.
Did you hear anything that you disagreed with?
I disagreed with a great deal of it. And of course, there's a good deal I agree with. But I think he's overlooking one very important matter, I think. Each one of us, I think, is terribly alone. He lives his own individual life. He has all kinds of obstacles in the way of religion or color or size or shape or lack of ability. And the problem is to become a man.
But what I was discussing was not that problem, really. I was discussing the difficulties, the obstacles, the very real danger of death thrown up by the society when when a black man attempts to become a man.
All this emphasis upon black man and white does emphasize something which is here, but it emphasizes it or perhaps exaggerates it, and therefore makes us put people together in groups which they ought not to be in. I have more in common with a black scholar than I have with a white man who's against scholarship. And you have more in common with a white author than you have with someone who's against all literature. So why must we always concentrate on color or on religion or this? There are other ways of connecting men.
I'll tell you this. When I left this country in 1948, I left this country for one reason only, one reason. I didn't care where I went. I might have gone to Hong Kong, I might have gone to Timbuktu, I ended up in Paris, on the streets of Paris, with $40 in my pocket on the theory that nothing worse could happen to me there than had already happened to me here. You talk about making it as a writer by yourself. You had to be able then to turn off all the antenna with which you live, because once you turn your back on this society, you may die. You may die. And it's very hard to sit at a typewriter and concentrate on that if you're afraid of the world around you. The years I lived in Paris did one thing for me. They released me from that particular social terror, which was not the paranoia of my own mind, but a real social danger visible in the face of every cop, every boss, everybody. I don't know what most white people in this country feel, but I can only conclude what they feel from the state of their institutions. I don't know if white Christians hate Negroes or not, but I know that we have a Christian church which is white and a Christian church which is black. I know, as Malcolm X once put it, that the most segregated hour in American life is high noon on Sunday. That says a great deal for me about a Christian nation. It means that I can't afford to trust most white Christians and certainly cannot trust the Christian church. I don't know whether the labor unions and their bosses really hate me. That doesn't matter, but I know I'm not in their unions. I don't know if the real estate lobby is anything against black people, but I know the real estate lobbies keep me in the ghetto. I don't know if the Board of Education hates black people, but I know the textbooks they give my children to read and the schools that we have to go to. Now, this is the evidence. You want me to make an act of faith, risking myself, my wife, my woman, my sister, my children, on some idealism which you assure me exists in America, which I have never seen.
Hello. Thank you so much for joining me. To y'all out there in the cosmos, I have been speaking for an hour with Mary and Maxine and Abigail Hastings, and I just have so much. I've heard so much. My ears are full. My ears are full, and I am so excited. But I wanted us to, expand the conversation a little bit, or extend the conversation a little bit. For the purposes of our community, and we've been talking about Black history at Judson in preparation for the sermon that is going to surround this piece. And my curiosity, I reached out to the three of you because you've been at Judson for a while, and I was interested in learning. I've been at Judson since 2013, and so my experience around Blackness at Judson is only within that time span, which has been a very, very, intense time. Black Lives Matter started in 2014, and but I haven't heard much about, pre-Black Lives Matter Judson, and even when we talk about Judson in the 60s or the 70s or the 80s, we don't talk much. I don't hear much about, the experience of Black people at Judson and the experience of those who are Judson who are white, and how they perceived race and so forth. So I guess the question is, what has been your experience around Judson's Black history or Black history at Judson? And any of you can begin. I guess Maxine, I'll just choose you.
Okay. Well, I came to Judson in '69. I came to New York because I wanted to live somewhere where there were people who were very different. I come from rural Pennsylvania, well, quite suburban Pennsylvania. Judson, at that time, the civil rights struggle was going on. King had been assassinated while I was in graduate school. I'd had the opportunity to hear him when I was in college. It was all very inspiring, and Judson was very involved in all of that. so there were these, I feel like there were these things where we were institutionally supportive of the Black struggle. And I know personally, I actually thought it was all going to be over by now, that we would have equality and all be living together. And so I feel like just in terms of my own personal, it's been like peeling layers off the onion. You start working on it and then you just keep going down there. And so I feel like Judson institutionally was very supportive. Howard Moody was there on the front lines. It seemed like leading clergy. There was a group of liberal clergy in the city who were involved. There was the Attica Attica uprising, and he went to Albany with clergy. He was protesting Rockefeller's policies. There was the welfare rights movement. There was the whole scandal with the welfare hotels. I mean, a lot of this is his people. Now I look at it and I see young scholars who've written books on this, and I thought, oh wow, I lived through that history, and it's always interesting to see the analysis then. So I think at that time we did not talk about necessarily making the church be more integrated. It was very open to Black artists, were very much front and center at Judson, and there was the feeling that we were not necessarily a church that was going to appeal to, Black church existed. It was strong. Why would we recruit from there? And, also a low church. There's I mean, I've talked to people who said, it's just a little too low church for me. I'm going over to the Episcopalians. So there were ways that we didn't seem to be culturally appropriate. And I think over the years we've changed. And then I think we've all become, I've had to look at my own internalized, if you had asked me in 1969 if I was a racist, I would have said no. Now I would say that no white person can escape it. Stop being defensive about it. We all are. The discussion, and then the only question is, what are you going to do with that? So that I see this as a constant journey that we're on.
So originally I reached out to Mary and Hastings to invite them, and it's interesting that you say that, how you would have viewed yourself in 1969, but Mary, who we'll hear from in a moment, encouraged that I reach out to you because Mary saw you as more advanced in racial consciousness than, say, the average Judsonite. So how do you experience that? And then we'll hear from Mary around what Mary's experience is in relationship to yours.
Well, I always saw it as more like, I had these activist inclinations. It was the anti-war and the civil rights. I mean, the way I got in the anti-war movement was someone from college called me up and I said, no, I'm only interested in civil rights. And he said, well, Martin Luther King said that until we get the war over, where civil rights are on the back burner. So then I joined the anti-war movement. So it had always been something from the time I was very young and watching freedom riders on television being beaten up and saying, I want to be part of that struggle. I think it was always that thing of like the white person being supportive, but not understanding your role in all, and also thinking that it was something that happened in the South and didn't happen in the North, so it's been a long, so maybe I was a little more vocal as an activist, but it's been a learning process.
Well, thank you. Mary, when did you first come to Judson and what was it like for you?
Well, I came to Judson probably the first time around 68, but I was here very sporadically until probably 71 or 2. And then I started being a regular participant. I came from California, where I grew up in rural area, very white church. Minorities, there weren't many except for the Mexican Americans, and we didn't cross paths. The school was pretty white. If there were any African Americans there were very few and didn't happen to be where I was. And similarly in college, it was still, and during that time, I was aware of the civil rights movement, obviously, and the anti-war movement, because I was of the 60s. So I like to say I was of the 60s, not in the 60s, because I never was an activist. And I came to New York more in a sense of personal frustration, not knowing where I wanted to be or do, but I wanted to be in a place where there were ethnic groups, where there were differences, where I could expand and grow and learn. And I came to Judson, and it was exciting, and I felt overwhelmed and sort of embarrassed because I wasn't an activist, and I was in this of people like Howard and Maxine and many others who were right on the front lines and really involved in all the major struggles. So I was happy to be a fellow traveler and support them from behind, as it were. At the same time, I was troubled when we would talk about race in Judson, because Howard was very much an ally in the Black community and well respected and always welcome in that community. And yet Judson somehow we didn't have, African Americans, obviously, who felt particularly comfortable or didn't hang out very long in the church, in the congregation. And I think Maxine has addressed some of the reasons that were, given, and I'm sure they were true for why that was. But what troubled me was it didn't feel right. And I understood the reasons, and yet somehow I naively thought, well, if you can, when people connect, there should be a way to connect across these lines. And yet I didn't know how to achieve it. I knew I was enormously uncomfortable with African Americans because I felt like they were coming with an experience that was so different from me, and that they wouldn't want to have anything to do with me anyway, just because I was white. So I always wore sort of a sense of embarrassment, but it has always troubled me. And I've been grateful in a way for what's happened, and certainly in the last 2 years. I think the CM program, the community ministry program, at least for me, and I think for others, really put it to us, the African Americans who were part of that program, that no, you're not, you've got racism, you've got racist issues to deal with, because we thought ourselves were so liberal and we're, out there on the front lines, that how could we be racist? Well, they said, no, you've definitely got some real issues here. And this unpacking of the issues was exactly, I think, what I needed and what I was looking for. I just couldn't articulate that was what I was trying to find. And so there's a lot to be proud of, but I also felt like we're actually finally getting to the meat.
Wonderful. One quick follow-up, and then we'll move on to Hastings. Is you mentioned that throughout your time, black people have come for a time and stayed a little bit and left, and in our conversation together before we started recording, you named some specific situations, but without going into those specific situations, can you say a little bit about what you perceived the experience was, both as yourself and perhaps maybe from the Black members who or congregants who were around, and why you understood why they didn't stay?
You're asking me?
Yes.
I thought you said Hastings.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, that's okay. Well, I mentioned that there were a couple of women I got to know, not well, but because of interactions at church. And one woman confided to me one day that how terrified she was every time her teenage son was on the subway. She always worried that he wouldn't make it home at night. And I was not so naive that I didn't understand where that was coming from in terms of the police and how African Americans are being treated. At the same time, I was so troubled because I felt like I have no place to take that. I don't know how I can be helpful. I don't know where to go with this. This is something that I think Black Lives Matter has sort of helped make us see, that there are places we should be taking it. But I didn't know how to do that. That's the kind of help I sort of needed, and the understanding I needed to gain is to how could I be an ally? How could I be a better friend? And then in another case, it was a woman who had come and she joined the choir, and she was there for a number of weeks, and we'd gotten to know each other because we sang together. And she had confided she was having some real physical issues. And one day, another person in the choir made a really personal remark about her, which was so offensive that I was just stunned. And just in bad, from a bad taste point of view. But what really troubled me was I felt it was coming, there was a vitriol there that had more to do with had something to do with her race, not just a question of the rather nasty personal remark. And I was so shocked because it, was not something, and I think this was a person who would never consider themselves a racist. They thought they were making, just a complaint about her. But that in itself to me was like, excuse me.
Yeah.
So those were the kind of things that, one-on-one I found troubling, but I also didn't quite know. I knew there was something wrong here. I didn't know quite where to go with it or what to do with it. And that bothered me deeply as well. So,
well, thank you for that.
Attacking my own internalized racism is learning how to be, to deal with, hopefully be a better friend.
Thank you, Mary. And we'll wrap up with our resident historian, Hastings, who has already dropped some, pretty amazing facts on me. So Abigail, can you tell us when you first came to Judson and what your experience was like as you shared it earlier, and then talk to us a little bit about Judson's Black history from a, from a formal perspective, the way we understand Black history, the first this, the first that, and the way in which Judson engaged Blackness around the time that you were here earlier.
Right. I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and then moved to Georgia and went to school in Alabama. And in each of those cases, there would be integration, but it took me a while to realize that it was minimal. And I didn't know that that actually makes a difference to the environment. You can't just say that you're integrated. So when I came north, and I intentionally wanted to be north, to be in a more diverse place, that's one reason I love New York City. And first visited Judson in 1978, January 1978. And the first person who greeted me was Roland Wiggins, our beloved Roland. And I thought, oh, good, this is an integrated church, not realizing that he was on staff to be the custodian. So that was kind of a hard moment when I learned that. And then it sunk in over time. Oh, this is not really as integrated as I would have hoped. But I also could see that the ministries of the church were directly related to the underserved and, as I say, the disrespected. And so I kind of signed on to the idea of, okay, well, what Judson is electing to do is using their white privilege power to work on policy. And I appreciated the fact that Howard and Arlene in particular, unlike myself, and my inclination is to impose my great ideas on programming, they were very attuned to finding the kind of programming that worked for the people, whether it was in finding fair housing. They were very involved in school, getting local control to the schools in Brownsville. And any area that you look at, that was one of the things that they wanted to do, particularly in healthcare, that we just covered part of our health activism. And you look at it and you realize whatever population is being served, they want to find out what they need and then see if they can supply it, and then hand it off to them. There was never a sense of, we need to run this for you. It's really just, we need to broker what you need to make this happen for your people, and step back and then look for the next thing that's falling through the cracks. So I really signed on to all of that. I thought it made sense, and at the same time wished for something different at Judson. And my experience of the Lily White Church, as Howard addresses it in his book, The Problem of Our Lily White Church, was that in some ways we were too thirsty, I guess, to use more contemporary. People would come in and we just like, oh, please love us, and yet not making the kind of changes that would actually make them comfortable to be at Judson. And I think part of what struck me about it is we're not as bad as there's a lot of juice in a Judson service, but it's not the Black church experience where there's a
Mhm.
lot of juice. And
Mhm.
so if you just look at us on a Sunday morning from that perspective, it's a little more like an Eddie Izzard skit that
Mhm.
he does where he's singing, oh God, I won't sing it, but it's so dull. It's so dull and so boring. And
Yeah.
so what really is in my head, what I keep hearing is when Pray the Devil Back to Hell was being celebrated at Union at Abigail Disney's film, and Leigh McGoey came from Liberia. And the woman that sang that day sang Kumbaya, like we do, come by here, Lord, Kumbaya. But she sang it with such energy and fierceness and intensity. It was like, oh, we've been singing it wrong. And so that's what the moment feels like to me at Judson, is that we've been Kumbaya for years. We've been very happy, we're integrated, please come to our church. But it's only in more recent years that we're starting to own what that would really mean for us. And so it's a very fertile and intimidating, and I think as a person of so little color, it just feels shameful in a way that it took the Black Lives Matter movement for people to feel it viscerally. I think personally I did, because of where I grew up and the experiences that I had and the number of tears that I can remember some often saying to Dora, you don't need to see me cry all the time. You don't need to be comforting the white lady, but it just makes me crazy that. So let me just slide over. Let me find the exit ramp here to just tell you that in the Judson history, it is interesting that we've had this same kind of concern for those around us and offering really incredible services from day one to the community. And I was telling Michael, I was cheered to hear that in the 1922 Judsonian, there was mention of Muslim children coming to the programming and how they had not tried to proselytize them, but to make sure that the conversations were respectful. And I thought that was pretty amazing. Now, maybe I should go ahead and confess too, that in the 1920s, there was also a program at Judson that was a minstrel show, because that's what churches did then. And it was completely unknowing and painful when you think about it. So now fast forward to the period that I know, because I worked with Howard Moody on his book. When Howard came to Judson, the first arts programming he did was with Mahalia Jackson in 1957. And then the first play that was produced at Judson was directed by Chuck Gordone, a Black man. And the first real activist thing we did was going into the park for the right to sing, which was partly fueled by people that were afraid that the bad element was coming into Washington Square Park, and that meant Blacks. So even these beginnings that Howard had, and then if you start to look at all the things that he was involved in, he says you'd have to be dead not to respond to the civil rights movement and all the things that needed to be done for the marching there. And as he says in the book, it wasn't a Southern problem, it was Southern and Northern problem. So we looked at our own dirty laundry in New York. And so there's a whole lot of our history that is outwardly focused and justice oriented. And I think what has always plagued us is we just didn't know how to attend our own house. And there was a lot of feeling for a lot of time that in the early years that I was at Judson, is that there was only so much Judson could do, that a lot of people were doing social activism in their work on a day-to-day basis. So a lot of what we expressed was through our staff and in our programming, but not always that we took the time or even knew how to take the time to address the internal racism that was going to be there. It was just going to be there. So.
Amazing. Well, thank you all. Thank each of you. This is, as we know by now, as the public knows by now, this is one part of a two-part sermon on Black history. Black to the future, uh, the history of, or the Black history of Judson and beyond. And so thank you so much for making the time to, give me something to do besides just write a sermon. This has been amazing for me. And I just look forward to having these conversations with other members of Judson who have been around for a while and will be critical in Judson's future. So thank you. So about Black history. Black history is complicated. Some of you, or at least one of you, have already reached out to me and like, wow, the Black people got to speak in February. And I, to be fair, Black people speak outside of February. And if you had white people speak in February, I'd probably be annoyed that white people are speaking on Black history. So it's sort of a catch-22. However, this year, I thought it would be important for me to get a better understanding of Judson's Black history. I think that it's really easy to assume that, churches know this or people know that, or sometimes some of us are so familiar with, the history and culture of white supremacy in America. We can guess. We don't even need to do research around what happened in an institution. We can see like markers. It's kind of like an engineer going into a building and pointing up to like, the ceiling and being able to understand the foundation. So we don't always need to do research, but I thought it important to actually have a conversation rather than making assumptions. And as you heard, it was just pretty amazing. Mary, Maxine, and I spoke for about an hour and a half. And what you saw is only a portion of what we discovered. But what's so important about what we discovered is sometimes we forget our Black narratives. When I first was researching what congregation or church I would attend in New York City, I checked out Judson's website. I saw some reproductive justice stuff. I saw some immigration justice. I saw Occupy. I saw ACT UP. I saw a lot of things that, made me feel safe that it would be safe to be Black here. But there was not this explicit history that we learned about today. And I think that it's important to understand why. A lot of times, because of our, I don't know how to frame it, but basically because we don't always get it right with race, we don't talk about it at all. There's an anxiety there. There's guilt. There's shame because it's very, very real. And not to necessarily say that that's all of what's going on in what we learned from Maxine and Mary and Abigail, but I think that that when we aren't explicit about race, then it leaves folks suspicious about race in this space, particularly Black folk. So I would like, like we've all heard it said, those who do not remember the lessons of the past are doomed to repeat them. I would add to that, and probably people wiser than me have already added to that, that those who not remember the successes of the past are doomed to forget them. It is important that we create a narrative, that we create a history, and I encourage and challenge us as a community to be thinking about researching and almost examining what our history of race is. It's not all bad. I learned that today. And it can kind of point out patterns of behavior that are with us today that we can change and move beyond. So thank you, Mary, Maxine, and Abigail for spending time with me. I look forward to having more conversations such as this. And now we're gonna enjoy a selection from Dora King, Strange Fruit.
Summer tweet. down and south. The bulging eyes and the twisted mouth, scents of magnolia, sweet and fresh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Here is the fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to sigh, for the sun to rise, for the trees to dry. Here is a strange and bitter
Find somebody. Her! Hey, what happened?
I got maze.
You got maze?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Wipe your face. Look, did you make it inside the Capitol though?
Yeah, I made it like a foot inside and they pushed me out and they maced me.
As they should. What's your name?
My name is Elizabeth. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee.
Well, Elizabeth, why was you there anyway?
We're storming the Capitol. It's a revolution.
She's the copy that.
This way, how do you think police would have responded differently had this been a Black Lives Matter protest?
I don't have to think, I know. I remember in 2014 when the police declared it illegal to stand still with their 5-second rule. So we literally walked in circles. We certainly would never have been allowed to storm a federal building. I was one of many people who was a defendant on a case that has now been thrown out, but I was accused of inciting a riot in Baton Rouge during the peaceful protest after the killing of Alton Sterling. I was accused of inciting a riot that I did not incite because it wasn't a riot. And yet we've got people standing tonight on the floor of the U.S. Capitol who in fact incited a riot, an insurrection, and a violent mob, and they are taking the microphone as if nothing has occurred. This is due to the complicity of elected officials, of appointed officials, of media platforms, certainly of law enforcement that, to be clear, did not just stand by while these things happened and provided, as was said, an unprofessional response. We have video of several law enforcement officers actually encouraging, participating, and permitting these activities, opening barricades, taking selfies with these insurrectionists. We have to be very, very precise here about exactly what happened. It wasn't just that the police stood by and did nothing. It's that some of them actually encouraged and participated in activity that was a direct violation of the Constitution and was a clear example of domestic terrorism. You know, Brian, I think we use words a lot and we don't always make sure that we're clear about precisely what they mean. This is the literal example of white supremacy. What does white supremacy mean? It means that white people believe that they have dominion over everybody and dominion over everything, that they are in fact supreme. So we saw a group of white people, of white supremacists here, thinking that they own a country that they colonized, and therefore they can do whatever they want with it. They think they can storm any building in that country because they believe they own it. They think that they can erect a noose on the side of a building that was built by enslaved Africans in America because they think they have full permission to do so, and did so on camera because they knew the police would do nothing about it. But they do not own this country. They do not own democracy. They don't own us. They are tragically confused, and we will not be intimidated despite the fact that the police did not hold the line today.
The Black present. Today is tomorrow's Black history. What's happening in America today is what will be posted on bulletin boards in elementary schools tomorrow. So like Rosa Parks will be replaced with Stacey Abrams, and Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois will be replaced by President Obama and Vice President Kamala Harris, Jackie Robinson, and Hank Aaron will be replaced by Serena and LeBron. But what will not be posted on those bulletin boards is our Black rage, the feeling that you saw or that you heard in the voice of Brittany Packnett Cunningham. It's like this seething rage that so many of us, particularly those of us who kind of understand politics and understand, can read a room, if you will. There is a Black rage that you just can't expose a lot of people to, or at least we try not to. Not just to keep spaces safe, but also just to like maintain our own sanity. But like when we think about today's or tomorrow's Black history, what I want to make sure that we don't miss is the feeling that Black people feel in spaces. The fire that Brittany Packnett was breathing. I want us to be in contact with. It's frustrating. And it's sad, and it's hard to always have to interpret for people why what is so obvious is happening. When we say defund the police, only to hear, no, reform the police. Not only is that like a debate that is important, but underneath that debate is an emotional dissonance that is going on particularly in places like Judson, where we're sharing bread and wine together, where we are sharing all kinds of resources and experiences, where we bring our joys and concerns. It is really difficult to, alongside of that, have these very, very, very seething debates with people that can get really, really emotional, while we're trying to balance not getting so emotional. When we want to have a conversation about reparations and we're laughed at, when we want to be asked for pay that is equivalent to what our worth is, but we're told that our worth is not kind of configured in the budget, there's a rage, and it's a deep discomfort that comes from like seeing what happened on Capitol Hill on January 6th, but yet our institutions condone the erasure of what happens in amongst Black people in our communities and in our churches and our congregations. That Black rage, or that feeling of like anger, comes from when we see people so fueled up politically for electoral justice, but yet, when it comes to like reimagining what our church would and could look like, or our community could and would look like, or you name it, wherever you sit, right? Like that same energy and sentiment is not does not carry over in those spaces, and that is what will not get captured in the future. Like that feeling is what probably won't get posted on bulletin boards, but that is the very real Black presence for Black people. Please join us as we sing The Abolitionists, My Country 'Tis of Thee.
Now is the moment in our service where if we were in our beautiful meeting room together, we would be passing around baskets to accept your monetary offering while we enjoy a creative offering. And though we can't do that right now, there are still multiple ways that you can give to Judson. You can give via Venmo using the handle @Judson-Memorial Church, or you can text the word Judson, Judson, to the number 44321, or you can go to judson.org/give, and there are multiple ways that you can give on that webpage. And while you are preparing to do so, don't take your eyes away from this screen, because you are about to enjoy two creative offerings, a reading from W.E.B. Du Bois and a dance from Donald C. Shorter, Jr.
The history of the American Negro is the history of this strife, this longing to attain self-conscious manhood, to merge his double self into a better and truer self. In this merging, he wishes neither of the older selves to be lost. He would not Africanize America, for America has too much to teach the world and Africa. He would not bleach his Negro soul in a flood of white Americanism, for he knows that Negro blood has a message for the world. He simply wishes to make it possible for a man to be both a Negro and an American, without being cursed and spit upon by his fellows, without having the doors of opportunity closed roughly in his face.
Black magic, black X, black habits, black medicine, yeah, everything black chucks, everything black hug, black love, everything.
Yeah, what are you listening to?
Flowers while they still give black roses, everything black child.
It's old school. My grandma said it was her grandma's favorite.
Skin noir, friends noir, here you are, black. Everything you need, better believe you are that. Skin noir, friends noir, here you are, black. Everything you need, better believe you are.
Shit. Freedom Summer.
Peace, child. I am your ancestor.
Yo.
The time has come and gone now.
Insane.
And though you may not know of us, know that we loved you in advance. We anticipated your brilliance and broke what chains that we could to build the world that you deserve. Tell me, do they teach a Freedom Summer in the year of 2020?
Brianna, Titi, we lost so many that summer. So much strange fruit. The pandemics of COVID-19 and police brutality. Something broke open in us. I don't have any words. Our people, we rose up everywhere. Every city, every night. We fought for you, for your freedom. I'll never forget those nights, those streets. 26 million strong.
26 million strong. The empire trembled, and suddenly there were cracks. Confederate flags banned. Public safety reimagined.
And get cops out of schools.
Workers striking in defense of Black lives.
We will say her name.
The WNBA. Then the NBA. Game after game canceled. Dangerous electeds voted out of office. We tore down the statues of our oppressors. Our people began to dream and fight for a world without policing, a world free of the brutal grind of capitalism.
I am somebody. And I deserve.
We carried our people to office.
With our fists in the air.
When cities started passing reparations bills, we wrote our own laws. And you are our wildest, freest dreams. We flooded the streets for you, for your health.
For your wealth. We spoke your liberation into being, into law, into land.
Child, if our work is not done, if you do not awaken every morning into Black power and Black love, then you must make your liberation whole. We are with you, and we know that you will win. Remember how we fought for you in the summer of 2020 and take back the power.
were our mandate.
We have a mandate. We have a mandate. And damn it, we gon' do it. Call and response. Call and response. Call and response. Call and response. The mandate for black people in this time. The mandate for black people in this time. Is to avenge the suffering of our ancestors. Is to avenge the suffering of our ancestors. To earn the respect of future generations. To earn the respect of future generations. And be willing to be transformed in the service of the world. And be willing to be transformed in the service of the world. Call and response. Call and response. Call and response.
The Black future. What does it mean to go Black to the future? As significant as it is that 400 years of white terror, that out of 400 years of white terrorism and oppression, we as a people have ascended to the heights, the highest heights of democracy. The future of Black people in this republic is still very much at risk, because for every victory, there are 1,000 defeats. And for many of us, each victory is only the silver lining for an ominous cloud of despair. For as important as representation in the seats of power is, the representation that matters most is the number of Black people who are incarcerated in comparison to our white counterparts. How well are we represented on Wall Street? How well are we represented in the numbers of infant mortality? And how well are we represented in the statistics of racialized police violence? This is why I say that the future of Black life is at stake and will not be overcome by electoral politics. For we cannot pour all of our resources into elections while also decrying abolition and reparations. The rate at which we are winning elections is light years behind the rate at which we are realizing our liberation. Progressive institutions such as Judson are vital in reversing the fate of Black life in America outside of electoral politics. It's not enough to vote for change in our politics. We must make the change happen in our institutions so that we ourselves will be convinced that change is possible. It's not enough to denounce white supremacy in our politics while we uphold white supremacy in our institutions. In order for America to go Black to the future, Judson must go Black to the future. We must imagine what it might look like if Judson was truly a multicultural space. When we think about 50 years from now or 60 years from now, we want those who are looking back at what we did to be like, that's when this happened. That's when that happened. This is when the decision was made to do this that made things are the way they are today. For if we cannot imagine Black people into our future, or a different reality for Black America, or a different understanding of what it would look like to not have any prisons and not have any ICE and not have any kind of segregated, bifurcated education system. If we can't imagine it, we can't begin doing it. And if we can't begin doing it, it's not gonna happen. We're still gonna look like 1965 in 2021, 2023, 2033, or 2063. And that is really what Black history is all about. So as we consider Black to the future, and really not just Black to the future, but really the future of Judson. In order for us to change this country, it's not going to be about sitting and being angry about what we see in the news. It's going to be about seeing what we see in the news or on television, and then turning that energy into our institutions and begin practicing and modeling the hope that we have for tomorrow. Thank you.
Every breath you take, every move you make, every bond you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you. Every single day, and every word you say, every game you play, every night you stay, I'll be watching you. Oh, can't you see that you belong to me? Oh, my poor heart aches with every step you take, every move you make, and every vow you break, every smile you fake, every claim you stake, I'll be watching you. Since you're gone, I've been lost without a trace. I dream at night, I can only see your face. I look around, but it's you I can't replace. I feel so cold and I long for your embrace. I keep crying, baby, baby, please. Oh, can't you see that you belong to me? Oh, my poor heart aches with every step you take, every breath you take, every move you make, every bond you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you. I'll be watching you.
Hear now the benediction from Amanda Gorman's The Hill We Climb. We are striving to forge a union with purpose, to compose a country committed to our cultures, colors, characters, and conditions. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid, if we are to live up to our own time, and if you will, into Judson's Black future. Amen, Ashe, may it be so.
Hello everyone. Crazy times, huh? On March 11th, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic. And it seems as if the world has come to a screeching halt. And in times like these, it's natural for everyone to be anxious and scared and not really sure of the future. There's a song that got us through one period in time. And I believe that same song can get us through this period. So from my family, the aliens, and myself, we just simply want to say, hold on, let's keep each other in prayer. And at the end of this, we can say we use this time to reset, to relax, and to recalibrate and become more connected with the community. Such a beautiful thing. I've seen more of my neighbors in these last few weeks than I've ever seen. So hold on, and we'll get through this together.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall
So